So, Keith, did you want to start by, I said since there weren't that many people here, I thought we'd start by just asking questions, and Keith asked a question. Do you want to first do a statement, or do you want to just go with the flow here?
No.
Just, I don't know if Carla said who I am. I'm Evan McMahon. I'm the Executive Director of the Libertarian National Campaign Committee, and was the campaign manager for Rupert Bonham, who ran for governor in Indiana. Met up with him. He was on Survivor, and great guy. Ran a charity for 21 years that took no public funding whatsoever, and managed to create a program getting kids out of the juvenile detention centers and out to prisons, turning their lives around. The state tried to mirror his same program without his input. His program costs about $4,000 per kid per year. The state spent $40,000 per kid per year.
Why am I not surprised?
And,
send him to college.
He has a 90% success rate. The state had a 10% success rate. So it was complete opposite for more money.
10 times the cost for 1/10 the result.
Yeah. Yeah.
Close enough for government work.
How can that happen?
And they were just amazed, and they basically said that they're never going to do another program like that because they failed. So, but we had, and during the course of the campaign, we had about 800 volunteers for a statewide campaign, and which was a feat to manage that many people and get them all active and doing things. So, what was your?
Well, I just became state chair in Iowa, and we have a core of young, energetic people that if I don't keep them active, they want change, they're ready to go, and my challenge is to keep them engaged, how to engage them.
I'll jump in here with, I think the biggest point that I would have to make, and by the way, I know these two folks well. I don't know if you know my background, but I have run 3 statewide ballot initiatives in Massachusetts, ran for office 3 times against Kennedy and Mitt Romney and the state auditor. Long-time campaigner and political activist. I won't go into any more details. But we had a campaign that engaged about 700 volunteers, so we have a similar background in that regard. I think the key to volunteer engagement for the Libertarian Party is pick a juicy, exciting campaign or project to get people rallying around. In a vacuum of something really big going on, it's kind of hard to get people excited. And I'm very much a subscriber to the idea that you want to get a candidate who gets on a key issue that is boldly libertarian, unquestionably libertarian, that you can translate into huge benefits for the voters. So, for instance, we did a ballot initiative to end the income tax in Massachusetts, which was also what I ran on for governor, and in 2000 what I ran on at the federal level against Kennedy for U.S. Senate. End the income tax on the federal level gives back, I don't remember the number now, it was at one point over $9,000 per family per year back in their family budget out of the state coffers. At the state level, it translated to, depending on which year you were talking about, $3,000 to $3,500 in cash back into each taxpayer and worker in the state every year. $3,000. And we got almost 1 million votes in each of the 3 initiatives that we did. Our best percentage was 45. We almost won in Massachusetts. Now this got people excited. Okay? And by the time we did it the 3rd time, which in that case was to cut the sales tax in half, where it was becoming more and more accepted and normal, the idea of, dramatically reducing taxes, I'd be on a radio talking show and people would be calling in going, yeah, cut it, yeah, and they'd be telling all these stories of government waste and how they're just snarling, seething mad at the politicians, and they weren't even libertarians, okay? But what happened with the volunteers is people love this, and especially, you got something for them to do. You got a petition drive. There's all the work around that. And then you have mailings and all kinds of stuff. And now you've got something to engage them. I would guess that you would have a heck of a time getting 700 people in Indiana to do something if you didn't have Rupert's campaign, right?
Yeah.
So that's the very first rule is get something going. And you can be talking now about 2014. It's not too early.
I would say that probably 98% of our volunteers did not even know that Rupert was a libertarian. They didn't know anything about libertarianism. They knew who Rupert was, and it wasn't just him from Survivor, it was who he is, what kind of guy he was, because he's kind of a hero in Indiana for the work that he does. And they wanted to be involved in that. We even had a kid, which I looked at this little kid, because I started when I was 6 years old. That was the first campaign I ever volunteered on. My aunt took me, was a Democrat, and we actually ran against her in this campaign, as a matter of fact. Yeah, that was kind of, she was a little upset when she saw me. There was a young boy who was 6 years old, and his mom was bringing him to come and volunteer at an event, and it was because he liked Rupert, because he'd seen him on TV, and he had the beard and the tie-dye, and he was a pirate, and so it was fun for that kid to get involved. But the vast majority of them knew nothing about the party. They knew his message, and they knew what he stood for, so they rallied behind him, and as they're volunteering, they're learning about his libertarian philosophy and learning about the party. So now we have hundreds of new, libertarians who wouldn't have found us if it wasn't for that campaign, that they could get passionate about and really dive into working. For getting young people engaged, we have ADD. Every young person, any person under 30 has some form of ADD or ADHD. We multitask, and you can lose our attention like that. So for me, the most important thing is you have to have things for them to do constantly, but you have to have clear guidelines for that. So you have to have a list of what their roles and responsibilities are and what your roles and responsibilities are as a leader. There has to be that clear cut, this is the chain of command. As a campaign manager, if you're a volunteer and you want to talk to me about the things that you are doing on the campaign, or you can't go to this walk event next Saturday, I don't want to hear about it, because I'm the campaign manager and I really don't have time to manage the schedules of 700 volunteers. We have a volunteer coordinator who does that, so go to them and they'll let me know if there's a problem that I need to look at. So there's that clear chain of command and that structure, having detailed tasks and something that they're actually interested in doing. So if I'm a pretty good speaker, so you might want to put me on the phones. You might want to put me out on a walk team, knocking on doors, talking about the candidate. If you're not a good speaker, you might be the person who drops literature on doors. You might be the person who's writing letters, but you have to task people with the things that they're good at. And when you first meet them, those are perceived. They're not actual, because the person probably has no idea what they're going to be good at on a political campaign. So you have to kind of keep an eye on it. That's really the volunteer coordinator's job. But keep an eye on how they're doing in that role. Are they happy? Do they like it? Do you need to readjust what their actual strengths and weaknesses are to better place them? You'll lose volunteers quickly if they don't like what they're doing. And you'll lose them even faster if they're not doing anything. So that's what I think is very important.
I wrote down a few key points that I wanted to make that I will probably come up with just to make sure they do. And chime in and ask questions anytime if you have them. A couple things that I've observed is that when our attitude towards volunteers has to be completely gracious. In several respects. First of all, I've seen people who try to guilt people into working. Oh, we're working so hard. You haven't done anything, and you didn't do it. So-and-so didn't do anything. This doesn't work at all. I mean, people who do anything at all, even so much as vote, are doing more than most people in this country are doing to advance liberty, who are voting to make it bigger or sitting home and doing nothing at all. Okay? So if they do nothing but vote once and vote Libertarian, thank them. If they show up once and then say, oh, I'm going to come again, and they never show up again, and you see them again, thanks for the time that you came. We're not paying them. We owe them nothing but gratitude. And sometimes you have to discipline yourself in that way. But I think that's something that I've seen people that, really try to lay on the guilt, and I think it's terribly misplaced.
It's,
Yeah.
that's right. It's interesting that Aaron Starr just handed me back my $10 that I gave him for coffee. Because the federal minimum wage is between $7.50 and $8. I honestly have no idea what it is. And unpaid interns are not allowed anymore. So every volunteer that you have, if they were a normal person, you would have to pay them. And actually, with the taxes and the insurance and the workers' comp and the unemployment insurance and everything else, it's actually going to be more than this $10 every hour. So if you think about it like that, this person could be working a minimum wage job and actually getting paid for the time that they're putting in on your campaign. So time actually has value. That's either money out of their pocket, time away from their friends and family, or time away from their schoolwork. So it's very, very valuable. My time is incredibly valuable. I have to respect your time if I want you to respect my time as well. So.
And you add to that, that's assuming they're doing the very most minimal,
Right.
Envelope stuffing or holding the yard sign. But you have the volunteers who really are the key players in campaigns and who throw their lives into it and bring accounting skills, reporting skills. If you're a treasurer, you're taking a risk. A treasurer is taking a risk of being criminally prosecuted, even if their goal is to abide by the letter of the law without exception, because campaign finance law is so complicated. Treasurer is one of the riskiest things you can do. It's right up there with being a candidate. And these people bring accounting skills, these people bring management skills, these people bring speaking skills, all variety of skills, who are worth a lot of money. And a lot of these volunteers are worth more than even your major donors, sometimes a lot more. And so the next big major principle that I think is important to remember is that the currency of volunteerism is thank you and acknowledgement. And you need to regularly thank everyone who helps, and you especially need to acknowledge publicly, with the exception that some people don't want that, but most people do and appreciate it, and acknowledge them for every single thing they did in your newsletters, in your email newsletters, in your communications. Mention them when you're publicly speaking. Talk about the people who put out for the party or for their campaigns. That is critical. Did you want to add anything to that?
At the end of each campaign, as the campaign manager, I personally write a letter to everyone who volunteered more than 25 hours through the entire campaign. And it's not a form letter that I just drop their first name in and sign my name at the bottom. It's actually written out to them. I remember them from the campaign, I know what they did, and I thank them for those individual things. And I actually put it on the campaign letterhead. Now, then the candidate should write something very similar, but the candidate probably doesn't know what you did on the campaign. So that's probably going to be more of a form letter, especially if it's a big campaign. But I try to make sure that that person was individually and specifically thanked for the work that they did. And they have it in something that actually can be used as a recommendation or a letter of reference in the future. So if you want to go to another campaign, or you want to just get a job, there's actually I ended up actually hiring her to work for my company. But there was a woman who volunteered as one of the 3 office assistants that we had. And she was basically the one who managed everything for me. She answered the phones, she managed my schedule, she managed, the meetings that we had with senior staff. She did all of that and made sure that I had coffee at 9 a.m., which was awesome. But so, writing a letter for her, she actually used that letter to get a job in a law firm as an assistant, a low-level assistant. But she used that great job experience on a campaign to do that. She ended up not liking it and ended up coming and working for me because for some odd reason she liked working for me, which is kind of weird.
Now, another thing that you can do is, as I mentioned in the newsletter, we've been making a push to feature key activists in our newsletter, LP News. Candidates get featured, and often they're the only face that people see. But there's these people behind the scenes who are incredibly valuable. So we've been urging the state chairs, and I urge you to do this as well, to let us know. There was a woman who we wrote up for her activism information, and she is so proud of that issue of LP News. It meant so much to her that that she was in there and was acknowledged. Also, you can have plaques and all kinds of awards. Kevin Nedler, Chair of Ohio, has taken this very seriously, and he's done, you might want to talk with him about what he's done in his state along the lines of giving out awards and acknowledging people. And this lady also has a wealth of information. Sharon Harris is the president of the Advocates for Self-Government. And did you want to add anything, Sharon, to what we said?
I think all the stuff you're saying is really good. Really important to use people when they say they want to volunteer. Something that often happens is they say, "Oh, great, I'm glad you didn't volunteer," and then not give them anything. That's one of the biggest mistakes we make, I think. So as soon as they volunteer, already have in your mind things for them to do and things that are interesting and fun, and give them a chance to finish something. That not to just like be expected to keep on doing something forever, but to have a point where they know they've completed something, and then they might want to do something else. Sometimes we tend to think somebody volunteers to do a newsletter, we think they're going to do the newsletter forever, and suddenly they decide they don't want to do the newsletter, and you're offended that they're not doing it, but they've been doing it for a year, and so maybe they might want to move to something else, or maybe they might want to take a break from volunteering and just do something much more minor the next time. So just keeping them aware and trying to give people things that fit them. For example, if somebody comes in and they want to volunteer, and you say, "Oh, good, next week we're going to knock on doors and give people brochures," that person may be horrified by knocking on a door. And so make sure that's something that they're suited for, that they will enjoy doing, because they need to enjoy it, and the acknowledgement, I think, is very, very important.
I think it's worth noting that I have struggled and always struggled, and I imagine you struggle, and everyone struggles with putting volunteers to work. It's hard. And one of the things that I try to do, we have a form at lp.org where people can say they want to volunteer, and they send it to us, and we send it on to the states. And then they may be in a state where nothing's happening, or they may be in a state where a lot is happening. And, they may just be, "I'm ready to go, I need something." Now, what do you do when you don't have anything going on right now? How can you put them to work? Well, I think first of all, if you set the expectation, if you announce that we need volunteers and then you don't give them anything, they may not come back again. Okay? So if you know you can't do it right now, you just don't have anything right now, say so. Say, "Please sign up. When an opportunity comes up, we will be in contact with you. Let us know the kinds of things you want to do. In the meantime, here are some things you can do. Write letters to the editor, post this at Facebook, pass this video along." You can give them things to do like that. The other thing that I imagine, I only know in the case of Virginia where I now live, but they have an active meetup group there, and I know a lot of libertarians using meetup groups as a really handy way to get people together, get a speaker and talk about something. The game Who's Driving, which you'll be, if you come at 11 o'clock, learn more about, is something you can always do that is a valuable training exercise. You might just make it a social, just a time to get together. But having some kind of places people can go where they can connect with other libertarians is very important, and especially between campaigns when there isn't anything going on. So now that takes organization, but meetup's pretty easy to do. It doesn't take a whole lot of, it's much easier than it used to be before that was around. So you can just slap something. You do need an organizer. You need someone who will pay enough attention to make sure it happens, get the room and so forth. But it is something that you can do that keeps people engaged.
And there's so many things to do on a campaign that can also be done by the county and the state party as well. Everything from phone banking, going door to door, either dropping literature, canvassing, and I always separate those two or dropping literature or door knocking, because they're two totally different skill sets. Yard sign distribution, working at events as support staff or sign-up staff, letters to the editor, contacting media, doing social media posts, spreading events and things like that. Let's see what else. Packing kits. That's a big job. One that will incur my wrath if it's done wrong and I get to an event and I find out we don't have half of our materials. Then we have a send out as a campaign to both big volunteers and county parties, which is separate from what our away kit is that we go use at events. We sold merch to raise money. We sold tie-dye t-shirts, copies of Rupert's books. We actually sold our bumper stickers and our campaign buttons. So we had a volunteer who would work to package all of those things up and get them sent out and processed. Responding to emails. If you wrote in with just about anything, unless it was coming directly to one of the senior staffers, if it came to the general campaign email, we had about 4 core volunteers who their job was to read that email and send almost a canned response back, and then to forward that to whoever the senior staffer was that's supposed to handle that area. But that makes sure that the person's getting a timely response. Because if you're waiting on a timely response from me, unless it's something that's, hey, we've got an event in 2 days, we need this information, you're probably not going to get it from me very quickly. So there's all kinds of things that happen on campaigns that if county parties and the state parties were doing the very same things with volunteers, treating the growth of our party like a campaign, we'd have a lot of new people, we'd have a lot more members, we'd have a lot of new voters.
And between campaigns, we want to get more volunteers for the campaign. Of course, the great thing to do is to do an Operation Politically Homeless Booth. Shameless commercial there, but the OPH is the ideal thing, and it's a thing that volunteers can do when there's not a campaign. They call and say they want to volunteer. Let's go to the county fair, let's go to the local gun show, let's go to the art festival, wherever people are gathered, anywhere, and set up an OPH and sit there and talk to people, get them to take the quiz, get their name and address that they want to volunteer to help. It helps you discover new libertarians. It helps you persuade people to be libertarian. And then when you get their name and address, you can tell them the next event that's coming up. And
I don't know how I was sitting with Sherry staring at me and not mentioning
well, you
OPH
just figured I would say it.
Just kind of figured everyone knew about those. Do you guys know about OPH booths? Have you ever done them? Really? Okay. Well, this is a lady who heads the organization
Just come up to me and
who
I'll make sure you
distributes
get
the
one.
whole system of OPH booths, which have been famous for a couple decades now in being the tool used at county fairs and other public venues where people are setting up booths and tables to recruit people. It's a great filtering mechanism for identifying who out there is a libertarian and then signing them up and getting them involved. And many libertarians have been recruited that way.
Just one comment, definitely found that a social event, if you have a social event first, it's easier to get volunteers. If people help their friends.
Yeah.
So if you've got a social connection at that, they find it's a lot easier. One thing, you mentioned getting the volunteer leads for national. My experience has always been that we never hear from those people again.
I think one of the keys is someone needs to call them right away. Now, one of the things we've started to do at the National Party just in the last month is Bob Johnston, who does candidate and affiliate support, he now calls all the new members to make sure that, now I'm not sure if he calls ones in the states that say they're handling it themselves. I'm not sure if it only applies to the other states, but he calls them just to say hello, how you doing? And what I recommend, that you get a team together in your state so that every new name you get from whatever source it comes, whether it comes from national, an OPH booth, any other campaign event, whatever, that you have a team or you have a few people, the kind that like to operate from home, maybe a mom with kids who can never get out or something, but they want to do something, and say, we're just going to feed you names, and here's the phone script of the points you want to cover. Hello, what are you interested in doing? This is what's going on in the state. You know, an introductory, because when people don't get the immediate feedback after they've signed up, they'll forget, and it's much harder to get them engaged if you don't jump on it when they're fresh, so to speak.
Your shelf life is 7 days, by the way.
I mean, I'd be
1 week. If you don't have a response to that person within 1 week of their initial contact, you've probably lost them. That's how attention deficit we are.
I mean, that's been noticed, you know. We get an email from National sending a follow-up email within 24 hours saying, thanks for sending a volunteer. Oh, I see you live in X town. There's some stuff going on there. Either if it's campaign season, yes. If it's not, I'm like, oh, you know, okay, the state convention's coming up, so, and give them like, and stuff they can do, I usually give them a list of 3 or 4 simple things that, okay, you know, you can write a letter to the editor, here's your local paper, or, you know, oh, so a bunch of us are going to the state capitol, and give them things to let them know something's going on, and
Responses are really low.
0.
Can I give you my quick fix to that?
Oh, I know what the quick fix is, I just don't like doing it.
Okay.
What's the quick fix?
The quick fix is the very first thing that he said was email.
Right.
How many emails do you get a day? Unless you know that person now, it's just another spam thing. It's just another thanks for calling. Okay, great, that's cool. I get those all the time, and I get from a lot of people. I get 2 or 3 of the exact same email, and I just delete them. I don't even look at them anymore. I'm like, oh, look, this person's sending me another thank you email. Great, cool.
So it's a phone call or?
It's a phone call. Then if you have a phone number to call them, your first contact with somebody should always be a phone call. The follow-up, and even if you just leave a message with the person, then it's, hey Michael, I left you a voicemail the other day. I hope you got it. Just wanted to write you an email and say, and I'm actually doing this because this is how I'm doing it. Just wanted to follow up with you. Hope you can come out to our next event. Looking forward to meeting you and getting you involved with the party. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me or give me a call. My number is done. And I don't normally even write those emails, so please don't get those.
If you don't have a phone number,
Then email.
then
If you have a physical address and your budget
send a
permits
letter
it,
to.
send a letter. Your shelf life on letters is about a month.
Oh, okay.
So a physical mailing for somebody who has contacted you, your shelf life is a lot longer, because it's something that weird, physical, tangible that they're actually looking at, physically holding.
Make sure it's hand
It
addressed.
sparks little chemicals, and you don't have to, but you do have to physically sign it. Don't print a signature on it. There's actually a Pew study, which is kind of silly that they actually did this, but they actually studied the responses of people based off of fully handwritten letters versus printed letters versus hand personalized versus digitally signed versus signed. The responses for personally personalized and personally signed were about the same. The full digital was significantly low for retention and feelings of welcoming and inviting.
So just the ink signature makes all the difference, huh?
Yeah, and don't try to fake it by using a different color ink either. I've tried that before too.
And I think hand addressing, if you can, probably encourages more people.
Stands out.
Yeah,
And addressing whenever you can. That's something else you can get a volunteer to do.
but do make sure that it's very legible and that you spell the person's name right.
We had a very nice woman in Massachusetts who was retired, and she would hand address our thank you notes. And so we would just ship her, when she got older and unable to travel that much, we would ship her the file and names and ship her the postcards. And before she retired, she was able to also donate by putting the postage on and paying for the postage. But then after a while, when she was on a fixed income, we needed to pay her for the postage, but she did all the handwriting of the cards and got them, and then dropped them in the mail. I wanted to mention one other area that's an opportunity. Now it's certainly just one piece of the many, many things that we can put volunteers to work for. But there's a lot of libertarians in this party who are analytical, academic types, right? Readers and researchers. Research is one area that I think the Libertarian Party needs to do a much better job of. And the game who's driving and related to that, the whole idea of libertarian solutions, proposing libertarian solutions to voters. In other words, I'm a candidate, here's how I'm going to shrink government, how I'm going to advance a libertarian agenda, and how it will make your life better. Now, in the process of formulating a libertarian solution, it takes a lot of research in some cases. For example, ending the income tax in Massachusetts will give back $3,000 to over 3 million taxpayers every year. 3,000. Now, you have to do some research to know how many people are in your state, how many of them are taxpayers. You have to know how much the income tax is taking in, and divide it by that number to get a mean average. That might seem pretty simple, but for one, just getting any kind of understanding of government budgets is It's hard to put words, hard to describe in words how government keeps its figures. It'll make you, the treasurer of a Libertarian campaign, detail every receipt and every dollar in and out of your campaign. But they don't break it down below billions in some cases. Billions. And nobody can find out the numbers. And it's an incredible barrier to shrinking government. But it's one we have to crack in every way we can. And I first got into this in '98 in Massachusetts, researching, when I ran for state auditor. There's a position where you want to know state budgets, right? That's when it started. I ran for federal office in 2000, then back to state in 2002 when we ran our first ballot initiative. In 2002, we had a team of 20 volunteers just trying to research and figure out the Massachusetts budget. And they worked at it, and many of them burned out, and some of them would send you all this stuff, and you go, it was like trying to go through government budgets. It's like, yeah, this is just how, okay, so what's the bottom line here? How much are they spending? What are they doing with the money? Where did it come from? And it's so hard to get those very basic answers. It's my opinion that if this party is going to be serious about shrinking government, every single state party is going to have a body of knowledge and experts, and many of the activists will be able to reel it off. Because I go to libertarian groups and I say, who knows what the state budget is in your state? And maybe there's one or two people in a convention that knows. And, where's most of the money going to? How much of it is coming down from the federal government? How much do the state governments pass down to the local governments? You need to understand these intergovernmental transfers between federal and state, state and local, and federal and local, and highway projects and all this stuff going on, so that your candidates can talk intelligently, and so you can start to really lay out plans as within your campaigns of, okay, I'm running for county commissioner, what are my authorities in this office? What can I shrink? What rules, regulations, laws, taxes, spending can I shrink or get rid of? Or departments, agencies, functions, same at state level, same at federal level. This is something, as we mature, we want to be really good at. We want to be able to articulate these things. And it takes research, and it takes people who are very, very persistent and diligent.
In a lot of states now, there's usually a conservative or quasi-libertarian think tank or public policy group that honestly has people who enjoy doing that kind of work. And if you can make friends with those organizations, a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, we did a white paper on that a year or two ago.
Yeah.
Or we have someone who can decipher federal math or
Yes.
in-state math. And
Yes. And absolutely, you want to start with them because they'll have a lot.
so I'd be happy someone's using all that stuff.
In Indiana, the state party actually has a couple of packages of some books that they had bound. Libertarian Solutions to State Problems, and then Libertarian Solutions to Federal Problems, and they were all branded from the Libertarian Party of Indiana. And it was about 4 years ago, there was a team of about 6 people who worked on that for the better part of a year. And some of the things that they did were, we can't get this budget, we can't get this. And they were actually looking for departments that they could cut and trying to get an expense or operational budget for state agencies, which you can't get in Indiana.
You can't get anywhere pretty much.
But they managed to get a hold of the Indiana Fiscal Policy Institute, and they sent them we happen to have it. They wouldn't give us any of their other research, but they did give us, here's the 5 agencies you talked about, you can look at that. And so that made it a lot easier for that team to do it. But those core 6 people, this was what they wanted to do. They wanted to work on policy. They wanted to do that research. I'm interested in policy, but I would never join that team because that's not what I do. That's not my skill set. So if I have Rich, who is really good at doing that sort of thing, and he wants to do it, the last thing I want to do is tell him, no.
Get on the phone and call people.
I'd rather you stuff envelopes. That he's going to be really unhappy with that. But if you can get that core team to do that. Now, our package in Indiana, we give the state ones to just about every candidate in Indiana. The federal one, we give mostly just to our federal candidates. But we also give them to new members. We use them at events and things like that. And they're done nicely. They're just spiral bound. But those are solutions from our state party. that we use, and they're great primers for our candidates to sit down and read these, because we've already done a lot of the heavy lifting for you, and we can just update that data every 2 years. Because it's not changing. The DCS, the Division of Child and Services, has not gone away. They're still there.
But the numbers are changing constantly. They're amending stuff all the time, throwing more money at stuff all the time, so it's a moving target.
Sometimes state legislative hearings, we had one, it was a budget hearing, and somebody printed a spreadsheet of public school spending for the last 10 years by town, and they were just handing it out. I'm like, wow. It was one of those things like, I'm going to hold on to this, because you could say, why is we've been losing students but doubling spending? You know, and it just happened to be something the legislative budget office just happened to be providing, and nicely they printed extra copies, so sometimes there's opportunities there. You know, just go to these hearings on the budgets, because they usually provide the information for the legislators to look at. If you can get an extra copy, if you want to do this kind of work, sometimes you have to go right to the source, because once it's like, after the process and it's finished, sometimes it's like these big bulk line items that don't mean anything.
We actually, during the campaign, there were 4 children that died, not from the campaign, because DCS did not respond to their brand new $40 million statewide tip line. And the new law is, if there's a child being abused, it has to go through the DCS first before the police can act. Unless it's, the child is being stabbed right there, then the police can actually get involved. But if it's a reported case of abuse, it has to go through a DCS agent before law enforcement can get involved. 4 kids died in 3 months because they weren't responding to the tip lines. There was a huge outcry about this, and unfortunately for them, it was also discovered at that same time that they had returned almost $60 million in unspent funds back to the state auditor. And we wanted to know what that $60 million was coming from, because here's DCS testifying before the state senate saying, we don't have the funds to train these agents to take, and we hate DCS to begin with, but if you're going to be there, so here was $60 million, and come to find out that over the course of 3 years, they had actually returned over $125 million, which I'm glad they were returning unspent money, but what it looked like was they were building up a system to say, we don't have enough support staff, we need to be the second most well-funded agency in the state. Now we have a significantly larger, double the size budget. Now we can buy all the other cool things that we want. Now we can really get into people's homes, because now we can literally, there was a proposal to put cameras in people's homes that have been reported for child abuse. So we wanted to get their operation budget, and we couldn't. They wouldn't give it to us. We sent in a Freedom of Information Act request, both federal and state. Couldn't get it, wouldn't get it, wanted to know why we wanted it. So I went to a state senator that I knew who actually sits on the Appropriations Committee for the budget and said, here's the emails that I've received from the bureaucrat at DCS. And he said, you're a public citizen, you're a candidate for office, you're actually running a campaign for the candidate of governor, or the office of governor, and you can't get this basic thing, let me help you. 3 months later, he's telling them, if you don't give me a copy of your operational budget, we're going to hold a hearing into DCS financing, because they told him no. We finally get it, and we find that the $60 million that they returned was from training and staffing budgets. So it was exactly what was being said. So now when they come back this session asking for more money, they go, we're going to give you what we gave you last year, but this time you're actually going to hire people. And if you don't, we will cut your budget. So I hope they cut the budget.
I mean, this kind of insanity is unearthed all the time. Just about any time you start digging into government, you find this kind of craziness. In my former little town in Massachusetts, population 14,000 people, suburban town, several activists spent 2 years sending the equivalent of Freedom of Information Act, the state's version of it, into the town to understand what was going on with the money in that little town. And this is a town that has town meetings, so it's relatively visible. They publish their budgets. And yet, I had heard and have had a lot of, I could spend hours talking about this, off-budget spending is a real cancer on this society that goes on at all levels of the federal, state, and local governments across the country. They have little budgets they stash away. And in Massachusetts, at the state level, they talk about the statutory budget, and that means that's the one they vote on, the legislators vote on. But it represents a little more than half of what they actually spend a year. The rest of it is automatically funded and automatically spent by mechanisms we've never been able to fully find out. And we started, raising the flag about this in 2002 a little bit, but much more in 2008. And they accused us of being crazy. I was on air live with a radio host and my opponent in a debate, and I'm on air. I'm going to go to this website, to the comptroller, state comptroller's website, to page 267, and there you will see 51 billion, not 27 billion. That's what they're spending. And my opponent's going, that's wrong, blah, 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 that's just transfers, and other excuses. And, we pushed and pushed. One of our former Libertarian candidates ran as a Republican for auditor. Still very Libertarian, though, unfortunately not on our team. But he ran on that issue. We continue to push it through our ballot initiatives in 2008, 2010. In 2010, the Democratic treasurer who got elected is now putting that, at least the high-level information of all the off-budget spending online. So all that work over 10 years has helped to create some visibility. But meanwhile, the battle goes on, and in my little town, they spent 2 years submitting these requests before they finally found out that not just the 10 million that they originally admitted to, this town's budget was 70 million at the time, but another 30 billion. It was between 30 and 40 million dollars that this little town was stashing away. Well, they're going, we don't have enough money, raise taxes, raise taxes, raise taxes. And because they exposed us, they actually managed for them to force them to drop taxes about 12% when this got exposed and put through a ballot initiative.
This is Libertarians Can't Win.
And you know what? These weren't even libertarian. These were a nonpartisan group of go-getting efforts. Yeah. And that particular one, I had worked with them and had sort of primed them on this stuff, but they did all the work. I didn't do any of it. They did all the work.
Well, coming from, if you live in New England, everything's funded through local property taxes, so this is something that affects everybody. Small town like that, a $30 million budget is just, think of per capita how much money that is.
Yeah, just give it to the people.
Well, if that sort of thing, you could do that anywhere. In any state, there's probably something.
Let me, give you something shocking here. So that $30 million budget that your small town had,
The hid one, yeah.
my hometown, or not really hometown, but where I live, Indianapolis, Indiana, we have a $27 million deficit this year. Just this year. That's,
For a city.
Yeah,
Okay.
for Indianapolis.
And is it illegal for them to have deficits?
Marion County by state statute is the only county that's allowed to carry a deficit.
Because that's kind of rare. In most state and local governments, they can't do that.
We're the only county that's allowed to do that, and it's because of our size, and we can issue our own bonds without legislature approval, and there's all kinds of things, but they're slowly trying to take a lot of that back. We have the Capital Improvement Board, which is, we have the Pacers and the Colts in Indianapolis, which is awesome. So we just built a brand new stadium. Now, we did get the Super Bowl, which was awesome, and after the Super Bowl was all said and done, we only lost $3 million on it. So we have the new stadium, and that was $2.4 billion in spending.
But it's going to return on its investment for
What happened to
every
the old
$1. It'll be $10 return to the economy now. Don't you know that?
The amazing thing is
Just a negative.
they've crunched the numbers, and they found that within 5 years of opening the Lucas Oil Stadium, we will have paid off the last stadium that we just launched. So we're moving ahead. We're getting there.
Yeah. So I think, engaging volunteers and doing this research and just getting together, like talking about this stuff, right? Get libertarians together and have the
But do you
people.
know what's going on?
Yeah.
What have you seen? And then you can whiteboard it and go, oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We actually,
This is a great topic, do this next 6 months,
Yeah.
going into
Yes.
2014.
Yeah.
Yes, 'cause
Governor's
people-
race or,
People will be busy next year, and you'll want to, this is now the time to be laying the groundwork for that.
in Indianapolis, we have a 4-mile sidewalk. It's a very pretty sidewalk. It has artwork on it. It has special shrubbery. It has a walking lane and a bicycle lane. It has every 3 blocks has a different set or different style of lighting. And it's amazing. It's called the Cultural Trail. I call it a sidewalk. That project cost $260 million. Now, a portion of it was from private funding, and they like to tell you about that and how it was funded by the Glick Foundation. Great. I was working on a congressional campaign. We were just about to get our buttocks handed to us in the primary, and we didn't know it. But the current Democrat congressman was holding a press conference, and I was really excited, and I went to go sit in the back and hear this press conference, because what he was going to do, I thought, was the School Corporation for Indianapolis, IPS, had just announced a $23 million shortfall, and they were going to have to close about a fourth of their schools, elementary schools. And so here's, less than a week later, this congressman holding a major financial press conference. I'm thinking he's secured federal funding for this school. We'll go to the press conference. I'm ready to go. I want to hear all the little notes, where he got the money from, the grants, because I'm going to rip it apart in a couple of days. No, he got $27 million in additional funding for the sidewalk. Now, where this is relevant
How long
is
is the sidewalk?
about 4.5 miles going around Indianapolis. And Indianapolis is like 10 miles square, so it zigzags through cultural districts, and it's so pretty. So they had a ribbon cutting 2 weeks ago in Indianapolis, because they've been building this thing for 3 years now, or 4 years. So they have a ribbon cutting. Now I'm at Starbucks, and I'm really irritated because all of downtown is packed full of people. And this woman is carrying this thing, and I helped her get in the door, and it was this big, awkward box, and I said, oh, what is that? Starting with a conversation, and she said, oh, it's a banner. And I said, oh, cool. And so she decided to tell me I'm the volunteer coordinator for the event today. And I went, oh, the ribbon cutting for the cultural trail. And she said, yes. And I said, wow, that's cool. It's nifty that that's finally finished, and the ribbon cutting's today. And she said, well, I'm glad you knew that that's what was going on, because nobody around here seems to know. And I said, oh, I follow it really closely. And she said, that's great, we really like that. And I went, no, because I don't like the cultural trail. And she said, why not? And I said, because of all the public money that went into it. And she said, oh, no. It was all private funding and federal grants.
Oh, okay, no.
And I went,
Federal grants?
you do know that federal grants is tax money, but that's public money, right?
China.
And she said, no, like we actually have to apply for that money. I'm like, are you? Well, that same woman was on the news that night, and on every single channel, she said the exact same thing. She said that there was no public money used, that it was all private money and federal grants. And
Not a single anchor.
a journalist actually repeated it, that it was amazing that no public money was used, that it was all federal grants and private funding.
Oh, my goodness.
So our volunteers, who were going apeshit about this, started organizing, and because it was a public project, a lot of the funding is public. Their budgets were public, their revenue sources were public. Not all donors were listed, but if you were a private donor, your information might not be in there, but it said how much you gave and that you were a private donor. So our volunteers tore that apart to come to find out that over 72% of it was public funding. That it came from some public tax. It came from robbing your pocket. So we started putting that everywhere. We weren't trying to hit the cultural trail. What we actually were trying to do was place the blame on all of the journalists who let this person say this and then reinforced it, and how they are doing a disservice to the public by giving inaccurate information on funding for a public project. And we actually got responses to it. But it was the volunteers who sat down and went through all of this and calculated and figured out where everything came from and broke it down from how much came from the state, how much came from the city and the county, and how much came from the federal programs. And it was hard, because it wasn't easily listed.
Now, speaking of, I have a related story to that, and then we're just about out of time. Rich mentioned using think tanks. There's a think tank in Boston where we went, because they always say, we need money for police, fire, schools, and roads. Police, fire, schools, and roads. Oh my, police, fire. That's their mantra. But in fact, when you study budgets, these account for a small fraction of spending, especially police and fire, like 2% of state and local total. Now, roads get talked about as well, and one of the things that we did was go to the this think tank in Boston, the Beacon Hill Institute, because I wanted to understand the big dig, this big, massive federal project. By the way, when they say, oh, you're not paying for it, the other one just say, remind them, oh, that's how they justify you having to send your tax dollars to Boston for the big dig. They're doing this all over the country. They're taking federal money from everyone, right? You're not getting a deal, by the way. So this Beacon Hill Institute, I wanted to find out of the statutory budget, $22 billion at the time, how much of it went into roads. And they were taking out bonds. The part of the big dig we had to pay for were all bonds. They didn't take any of it out of the existing budget. So I looked at what you could get from the budget and added up all the agencies and spending allocations that appeared to have anything to do with roads. The board this, the road safety this, the road that, okay? $1 billion out of 22. Okay, why can't they use that to pay for the big dig, or what are they doing with that money? So they let me a staff person at Beacon Hill Institute for a morning, and she called on all her ties in the State House to find out what they could about the budget. And she and I then talked, and we pieced together, all you could get is a little anecdotal information. You couldn't get an answer. But what we were able to surmise was they actually spent $150 to $200 million of that $1 billion on maintaining, building, or repairing roads. And the rest was bureaucracies of some kind. Okay? And these are some things you learn when you dig in there. So we're out of time, and thank you all for coming. And thanks for your help sharing. Thanks, Evan.